Konnichiwa and welcome everyone to today's offshore wind webinar brought to you by ERM, and thank you for joining. This is the second of 4 offshore wind webinars we're having this week and next week. On Tuesday we had a webinar on Korean offshore wind, and next week we have one on Tuesday on China offshore wind, and on Thursday on Taiwan offshore wind. But today, most importantly, we're focusing on Japan. So we'll just go to the introduction slide, please. So that introduction is going to be by myself, and I have a few slides which I'm going to talk over, which are more about general trends in the industry and hopefully stimulate some questions at the end. We're very much keen to hear your questions after you've heard the 2 presentations by my colleagues Hasegawa-san and Suzuki-san. So the format of the presentation will be, as I mentioned, 2 presentations by people from ERM. There'll be some polling questions after the first presentation and after the second presentation, then some Q&A, and then wrap up with some general comments, which hopefully are valid across, and hopefully we've learned something from the questions and other comments that we get throughout this webinar. So next slide, house rules, please. So we definitely encourage, as I said, active participation, questions, and you can post your questions at any stage at the bottom, the icon at the bottom of your screen, and we will discuss the questions before the end of the presentation. The webinar is being recorded and be used for ERM internal purposes, unless there's a special request, which we just need you to register if you'd like to receive the recordings directly. We just have to take a register of that. However, the presentation materials that you see will be sent to everyone who registered, not just those who attended, but those who registered at the webinar as well. And we have enabled the English transcript feature. So if you like, click the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and select to show subtitles. Okay, first of my slides, please. I think this is just a general comment. Obviously, renewable energy the power sector has been affected by COVID, like all sectors. However, renewable energy is less affected than others. What we've noticed is, as a precursor to growth out of the COVID affected areas, seeing sovereign investment and increased improvement and encouragement via regulations, by legislation, by tariff mechanisms, etc., to support the growth of alternative energy and renewable energy. So as you can see, renewable capacity additions are on track for a record expansion of nearly 10% in 2021. Next slide, please. So just here is a graph showing the projected increases in the size of wind turbines. There'll be some discussion about this and the effect of the increased size of wind turbine and the capacity of wind turbine farms. What I'd like to do, though, is I did mention that there's going to be 2 presenters today. One of them is by a recent acquisition by ERM of Renewables Consulting Group, RCG. They are now 100% owned by ERM. They're specialists in technical advisory, the technical advisory side of renewables, and together we are able to provide a comprehensive technical, environmental, social, and other associated advisory services. Some of the factors that we will discuss in the presentation that are reflected in the size of wind turbine growth is shipping lane access, proximity to military zones, etc., bird and bat flying paths, migratory bird paths, the increased tip height or the increased height of wind turbines will potentially impact all of these, especially if it's combined with a large gigawatt plus type of wind farm installation. Next slide, please. Though we're not going to directly talk about hydrogen in this presentation, we are going to, when we invited you to join, we're going to talk about offshore wind projects. But what is happening is the focus, the media attention on offshore wind is increasing, and we all know that options or alternatives to thermal power generation and fossil fuels are on everyone's lips at the moment. And hydrogen, though it has a number of technical and transportation and other issues, it is probably the biggest growing topic in the energy sector at the moment. We've seen a huge increase in inquiries by potential suppliers of green hydrogen, by transporters of green hydrogen, and the alternative technologies associated with that. Just one figure which I'd like to quote is that I've seen is in 2030, oil and gas offshore market expenditure, and that's not just capital expenditure, but the entire market expenditure, offshore oil and gas expenditure is projected to increase only slightly to 140 billion. That's by 2030. Offshore wind market expenditure is projected to increase to 87 billion by 2030. So offshore wind is just one of the technologies that will be utilized in the future, but some massive numbers being talked about in terms of the rate of growth of investment in offshore wind. Next slide, please. Another point that, again, we're not going to go into detail, but is covered by both ERM and RCG, is the safety side. So as turbines become installed in deeper water, as they become larger, as the different technologies, floating and other types of fixed bottom technologies, there is going to have to be a greater focus on safety systems. A lot of the jurisdictions where offshore wind is being built don't always have experience in offshore and marine and oil and gas, etc. So the safety side of construction offshore is immature. So another projection that we are putting forward is that we see increased focus on the safety side, erection, construction, and operation of offshore wind. Okay, that's about enough from me, but what I'm going to do now is introduce you to our first speaker, and that is Mr. Akio Hasegawa. He's a Director and General Manager of RCG in Tokyo. He's extensive experience with project development and onshore and offshore wind in Japan. Prior to joining RCG, Akio was Engineering and Project Manager for Invenergy and Engineering Manager for RES in Japan. He's a highly qualified engineer with many years of experience in the field of renewables. So over to you now, and I'll turn my video off for a while.
Thank you very much, Sean, for the introduction. Let me start my presentation. I am Akio Hasegawa, Director and General Manager of RCG, group company of ERM. I'm very honored to have this presentation for you today. My presentation is offshore wind technical risk. This is agenda for this presentation. I would like to highlight a major technical risk for Japan offshore wind project, and I would like to focus on grid capacity and the base port as risks. But please let me explain about the current status of the promotion area and auction before discussing these technical risks. Please go to the next. As you may know, this shows a process to designate the promotion area in Japan. It starts with information gathering. Prefecture who has intention to promote offshore wind, they will provide the METI with current status and coordination with local stakeholders with a potential area. And the next process, announcement of promising and preliminary area announced by METI. And then in the third process, they will establish the council to discuss the potential of the area and to agree to designate the areas. Normally, 2 or 3 times councils are held for 1 year or more until they agree to designate. The next, they will METI, the government will designate the area as promotion area. And then they start public bidding process. Normally 6 months for public bidding and another 6 months for reviewing. So roughly 1 year is necessary to decide the winner. Please go to the next. This is the latest status of promotion area. Currently, 4 areas for round 1 and 1 area for round 2 has been already designated officially in this green highlighted area. And then, and also another 7 promising areas in this blue highlighted, and also 10 preliminary areas already identified. Especially, we can see more potential in this preliminary area in the amber highlighted. 5 areas among 10 are located in Hokkaido. You can see these areas. So we very much expect that development, offshore development in Hokkaido will be accelerated, where the wind condition is good. But higher grid constraint in Hokkaido. So this is very especially relevant to the grid issues I will explain in the later stage. Please go to the next. This is a summary of the current status of public bidding process. Regarding round 1, the winner was already awarded for Goto project. This one, top one. This was a little bit special project. This was for floating project, which was the first commercial base floating offshore wind project in Japan. And other 3, Noshiro Mitaneoga and Yuri Honjo in Akita Prefecture, and the Choshi project in Chiba Prefecture. They are still under reviewing of the bid application. We expected the winner will be announced within this year, but it is delayed. And we expect the winner will be announced early next year, 2022. And looking at the other round 2 project, it varies on each areas. The most advanced project is Happanoshiro. They completed 3 times councils already within this year. And officially, the promotion area was designated in this year. Official timeline has not been announced by the government, but we expect public bidding will start in the early next year. Other three, Saikai, they already finished 2 times council, but third time, third committee has not been held. So it is unknown, but we expect they will hold the third committee next year, and the public bidding will start in next year too. And the remaining 2 projects, Aomori North and Aomori South, they haven't had enough councils yet. So it is unclear when they can conclude to designate the area yet. But this is also, we expect they will start auction sometime next year. Please go to the next slide. And this is a table summarized major technical issues and expected solution being discussed by the government at the moment. First issue is grid constraint. Several measures and several solutions are being discussed at the moment. N1 Intertrip Scheme and the non-farm connection have been already introduced. It enabled to increase the grid availability in the region, but it is not enough solution to accept the potential offshore wind in the future, exceeding the demand in the region. So this requires a measure across the region, such as DC marine cable. Next issue is unmatured infrastructure, which is base port or construction port. Currently, 4 ports are being upgraded, but further ports are necessary to be upgraded for the future land project. The last issue I would like to mention is excessive risk of the developers. In many projects, multiple developers are conducting survey at a large risk and at a large cost in the same area. Currently, this year, Japanese government decided to promote Japanese version of centralized model. Under this model, the government will conduct some necessary geological surveys and wind measurement and initial environment survey for the developers and to reduce their risk. Please go to the next slide. From this slide, I will explain each measure and issues. This is N1 Intertrip Scheme. This scheme is a scheme to utilize the capacity under no contingency situation, which is a normal operation situation. As shown in the figure on the left side, normally, when the transmission line has 2 channels, 2 lines, only 1 line is used among 2 lines. Under N1 Intertrip Scheme, remaining line, the second line, is allowed to use by instantly stopping the power supply in case of failure. So this is described in the figure on the right side. As you see, we can use the second line, but we have to accept instant stopping in the case of failure here. This scheme is already introduced in each region. Please go to the next slide. This is a second scheme already introduced. The idea of this scheme is actual power flow is fluctuating, like as shown, red highlighted area in this figure. But area in white, this is a gap between operational capacity, which is this red line, and the fluctuated line. So by the introduction of this non-firm connection, they can use this gap for renewable. And this scheme enables more renewable source to connect without significant grid reinforcement. This is also partially introduced in Japan in each region already. Please go to the next slide. From here, I would like to show you the expected or target offshore wind capacity in 2030 or 2040. The government, through the discussion to achieve their emission, the government targeted 10 gigawatt offshore wind in 2030 and 30 to 45 gigawatt offshore wind in 2040. So this bar chart shows targeted or expected offshore wind capacity in each region. Just considering the wind suitability, as I explained in the previous slide, we see a significant offshore potential in Hokkaido, in Tohoku, and in Kyushu, in both 2030 and 2040. Please go to the next slide. But the issue is, as I explained in the previous slide, also Hokkaido and the Tohoku, it's very suitable for offshore wind, and they have a significant potential. But the issue is very strict grid constraint. This chart shows the magnitude of the curtailment rate. I didn't add the number, likely number, but according to the study conducted by the government and the utility companies, roughly 60% of curtailment is expected in Hokkaido in this case, and also 35% curtailment is expected in Tohoku area if we don't take any drastic measure. Please go to the next slide. This map shows the expected capacity for offshore wind, solar, and onshore wind with demand each region in 2040 to achieve 45 gigawatt offshore wind. As the legend shows, blue for onshore wind, orange for offshore wind, purple for solar, and amber for demand. We can see, obviously, higher offshore wind potential with lower demand in Hokkaido and Tohoku. But in Tokyo, Chubu, and Kansai, they are all bigger cities. They have less renewable potential, but they have very high demand that they can accept the power from other regions. Please go to the next slide. So this is this describes the concept of the solution to make the balance between demand and the potential. Now the government is discussing to introduce DC submarine cable between Hokkaido and the Tokyo region. And also they are discussing to strengthen existing inter-regional transmission line between Kyushu and Shikoku or Kyushu Chugoku area to export the renewable source from the region to the Kansai or Tokyo or Chubu. Please go to the next slide. Please let me move to the next topic. This is port construction port plan currently discussed. Currently, the 4 ports are already upgraded or under upgrading, which are Noshiro Port and Akita Port in Akita Prefecture, and also Kashima Port in Ibaraki Prefecture, and Kita-Kyushu Port in Kyushu area. These 4 ports were selected to cover the RE project, round 1 project in Akita, and also the port project in Kashima area, and also another port project in Kita-Kyushu port area. But as we see, there are many more opportunities in Hokkaido and also other regions. So we expect the government will designate the further construction port to be upgraded in the near future. Please go to the next slide. This timeline is short. It's a port upgrading discussion timeline by the government. Basically, the port upgrading is taken lead and discussed by the government, mainly MLIT. They already had 3 times committee to discuss next port. They mainly focused on the what turbine sites should be considered. As the initial introduction Sean explained, obviously the market, we need to consider the turbine growth, 10, 15 megawatt or even 20 megawatt. So this is a very important factor, and it must have a significant impact to decide the specification for the port in Japan. And also another important factors to be considered is, as they discussed, specification, what specification should be considered for floating offshore. Floating offshore should have different port facilities compared to fixed foundation. And also Japan has a great potential for floating offshore. So this is also very important topic, and the specification should be considered, should be discussed. We are now here. We expect they will have another 2 times committee. They are aiming to summarize and issue the master plan early next year, including port upgrading plan, specification and layout plan for both fixed foundation and floating, whether they consider the turbine growth like 15 megawatt or 20 megawatt it will be quick. We expect they keep discussing and they will issue, and they will make this clear early next year. Please go to the next slide. This is a summary of this discussion in terms of major risks for the future Japanese offshore wind project. Regarding grid, as I explained, they continue to have a discussion in their committee. Non-farm connection master plan has been already introduced, but to achieve further introduction of renewable energy from Hokkaido, from Tohoku region, they are now discussing the cross-regional measurement, which is DC submarine cable and reinforcement of existing interregional transmission line. So we expect they keep discussing and they will issue the master plan, including such measurement early next year as well. And then, according to achieve the target in 2030 and 2040, we expect such grid reinforcement, including DC submarine cable, will be conducted step by step. And the next issue is construction port to improve the unmatured infrastructure. 4 port already has been upgraded, but for the next further upgrading of construction port, this is also we expect the government will issue master plan, including further upgrading, further construction port. And then after issuing the master plan, we expect they will upgrade the port for the later round project. And the last issue and the solution was a Japan version of centralized model. This is already announced, and government already chose test of site to introduce the Japanese version of centralized model. The detail is not clear yet, but we expect they will expand such Japan version of centralized model to other projects in near future. This is my last slide, and I would like to finish, but we very much expect such measures will be put in effect and will support the future promotion of offshore wind project in Japan. We RCG have local experts who are familiar with this kind of local policy, and very delighted to support your project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hasegawa-san. A very knowledgeable presentation, and I was particularly struck that there was the historical background was covered, then what's happening sort of contemporaneously, so what's happening right now, and then projections of what will happen in the future. So obviously no one can read the future in too much detail, but there was a lot of good projections on where and how and when things are going to happen. So before we go on to the next presentation, we're going to have a little not a break, but a lighter section. So we've got 2 questions for you. This is the first one. So there's no right answer to this. There's we've got 4 webinars, which I mentioned earlier in the presentation, and just ask you to click on which one you think will see the most activity for your company in the next 12 months. Just choose one, and in about a minute, the answers will come up. I can't vote, so it's just people who are attending versus our invitation who can vote. Well, I did expect to see Japan number one, and there we go. That's the answer that we got. And secondary, Korea, and then Taiwan. I think my comment on that one is that the rate of growth in potential is probably highest in Korea. For a while, we've known what's going to happen in Taiwan with round 3, the upcoming round 3 auction process. So now we'll go on to the second question. And this is where, outside those 4 countries where we're having the 4 jurisdictions, we're having the webinars, where do you see the next biggest offshore wind development opportunity for your company? Just pick one there. Once we see the results, I'll give you the answer that we got from Korea, our Korea webinar, to see if it's the same as we get on this poll. Interesting. Okay, so ahead is Vietnam, and that's probably, well, it's obviously because of some of the pronouncements made in the 8th Power Development Plan that is just about to be approved. But interesting that Philippines is number 2. That's a little bit of an coming from the side, but we're starting to see ERM and RCG some inquiries from people in the Philippines. But yesterday, Australia was number 1. Sorry, not yesterday, on Tuesday, number 1 in this poll. Anyway, a little bit of a break from the presentations, but now we're ready to go to the second of the presentations by my colleague, Mr. Yohei Suzuki. And I just need to find his details. Wait, Suzuki-san is a principal consultant with ERM. I've known him since I joined myself ERM 8.5 years ago, and he's been directly involved with all the work that we've been doing in Japan, the initial screening studies, the red flag due diligences, and now as we progress into the environmental impact assessment and environmental and social impact assessment reviews that we've carried out in Japan for a number of our clients. So off you go, and look forward to your presentation, Yohei.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Yohei Suzuki. I'm a principal consultant of ERM based in the Yokohama office. And now Hasegawa-san has just explained the technical risk of an offshore wind project in Japan. And from now, I will take over the presentation and will present, the key developments of the offshore wind project, mainly in terms of environmental social risk management, which are the key items for success of an offshore wind project. Next, please. And from here, I'm going to present some key environmental concerns of an offshore wind project in Japan, comparing with lender's requirements, such as IFC performance standards and equity principle. So these requirements are considered as best practice, and also the global leading company also use these as a company's standard. So complying with these lenders' requirements are important, not only to get kind of finance from the lenders, but also will be important for the success of the project by managing environmental social risk appropriately. So in Japan, offshore wind project is governed by various regulations, including EIA Act and also Renewable Energy Act, and also other regulation, which may include some like a noise regulation or occupation or health and safety related regulations. And for the lender's requirement, IFC performance standards having like an 8 standard, which include performance standard 1, which shown the red color is a risk management, and the 2, performance standard 2 is regarding to labor, and performance standard 3 is a resource efficiency, which includes pollution control. And also the performance standard 4 is about the community, which includes community health and safety and security, that kind of item. And the performance standard 5 is about land or resettlement issues. And the performance standard 6 is a biodiversity, and the 7 is indigenous people, and the number 8 is a cultural heritage. And in addition to these 8 performance standards, there's another standard like an equity principle, which is a environmental environmental social standard for the private bank. And the last year, equity principle introduced kind of new 2 requirements. Basically, an equity principle following IFC standards, but the equity principle are the 2 requirements, which include the human rights impact assessment and also the climate change risk assessment. So comparing these lenders requirements and the Japanese requirements, there is some like a gap as shown in this slide. One is in language, Japanese, and also the English, and also in the assessment process and the standards, which includes some like assessment approach for the biodiversity. And also the scope and the coverage would be different. For example, onshore components like transmission line or an onshore cable, normally not included in Japanese EIA, but lender's requirement request to include this facility too. And some of the key gap will be like an environmental social management system, which is a requirement of PS performance standard 1. And stakeholder engagement is a requirement of performance standard 1. And the economic displacement is a requirement of the PS5, and critical habitat assessment, and also the human right and the climate change risk. So these are some kind of gap between the lender's requirements. I'm sorry, I'm not back. Sorry, Nim-san, can you just confirm, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry.
We lost you for a minute.
Issue with my PC. Okay. Then I'm going to explain something like a gap we just explained in my previous presentation. One is ESMS, Environmental Social Management System. IFC performance standards required to establish environmental social management system, so-called ESMS for the project. And ESMS is a framework that integrates environmental social risk management into the company's business process. So in general, the component of ESMS include what is showing this slide, which include like company's policy or risk and impact identification and the management program or organizational capacity and competency, and the stakeholder management or monitoring review. So these various environmental social components are included in the ESMS. But in Japan, the development in environmental social management system ESMS is not required. And normally, environmental social risk is managed individually by complying individual regulation by various departments within the company. So for example, environmental issues and stakeholder issue or contractor or workers issues are managed by each department separately. But I understand that many companies may already have a kind of management system to cover individual topic. But there's no integrated and centralized management system to manage whole environmental social matters. So ESMS is simply extends that approach to the management of your business impact on environment or social or workers, and also the external stakeholders. Next, please. And this slide shows how ESMs can be used to manage environmental social risk and issue at different stage of the project. And please note that ESMS is a living document and needs some adjustment for each stage of the project. For example, like an ESMS at development stage, as shown in the left side, blue arrow. This stage, ESMS can be used to identify and understand like a country-specific legislation or lenders' requirement, and also help to set up a company's policy, and also the stakeholder identification and engagement, and community relations. While for during the construction stage, the item like contractor management or community relations, stakeholder engagement, or laborers or working condition, because during the construction there's like a safety risk. So the management of the labor and the working condition will be quite important issues, and also the occupational and the community health and safety risk and environmental impacts, which are identified during the development stage by carry out the EIA study. So like this, ESMS can be used to manage various environmental social issues at different stages of the project, and it is quite a powerful tools to manage environmental social appropriately. Next, please. The next one is stakeholder engagement. There are legal framework for the stakeholder engagement related with an offshore wind project in Japan. For example, during the EIA process, the stakeholder meeting, like a public consultation or information disclosure requirement are stipulated in the EIA Act. And also, in order to designate a promotion area for the offshore wind project, the Renewable Energy Act required to set up a council to engage with relevant marine user stakeholders, such as the fishery corporation. So, this process is considered to secure to get a social license from the marine user for offshore wind projects. But for potential issue related to stakeholder engagement in Japan is as shown in these 3 bullets. One is a process of stakeholder identification analysis is often not documented well. Although the company is doing good like a stakeholder engagement, but the process are not documented well. So only the person who are engaged can understand who is the key stakeholders. But other team members cannot understand the process. So that might be some issue. And similar to that, the development of the stakeholder engagement plan is not required. And based on my experience, Japanese company are not preparing that kind of plan. Although they are doing the stakeholder engagement appropriately, but they are not documented. And the last one is ignorance or unfamiliarity with local custom. There might be some issue if the developer does not respect the local custom, like the way they engage with the local community or fishery corporation. If the approach is wrong, then they might be rejected. So that might be one of the issue. And the figure showed one of the best practice for the approach for the stakeholder engagement. So first, the stakeholder identification mapping is carried out. Then after that, stakeholder analysis. And after that, stakeholder engagement plan is prepared. Then implement, stakeholder engagement as per the plan. And ideally, these processes are well documented. Next, please. This is economic displacement, and this is mainly related with fishery for the offshore wind project. Economic displacement due to the loss of livelihood may be expected. But in Japan, due to the implementation of the Renewable Energy Act, process has been set up to select a promotion area for the offshore wind projects. And one of the conditions for the selection of the promotion area is that there will be no impact on the fishery. But how can we assess the impact on the fishery? In Japan, the EIA study, they focus on the impact on the fish species from the point of environmental conservation, such as how the underwater noise impact the important fish species. However, EIA does not evaluate the impact on the livelihood of the fishermen. How much the fishermen may lose their livelihood. The EIA study does not evaluate that kind of assessment. So the fishery impact assessment may be required to carry out to evaluate the impact on the fishery. And however, fishery impact assessment is legally not required, but this is something which is expected from the stakeholders. And so, by carrying the fishery impact assessments, and if any impact on the livelihood is expected, then development of the livelihood restoration plan may be required. Next, please. And this slide shows the relationship between the EIA and the fishery impact assessment in Japan. But on the left side, for the EIA process is regulated by the EIA Act. And the purpose of EIA is to evaluate that environmental impact is avoided and mitigated as feasible or as possible, and doesn't evaluate the impact on the loss of the livelihoods. On the right side is fishery impact assessment. Again, there's no legal framework to carry out fishery impact assessments. and the requirement of fishery impact assessment may come up as a part of the discussion in the council meeting for the designation promotion area. So this is a kind of difference between the EIA and the fishery impact assessment. Next slide, please. Okay. And this slide presents a requirement on biodiversity management. IFC performance standards require the project to carry out critical habitat assessment to evaluate impact to the critical habitat. And IFC performance has a specific rule rule and also definition on biodiversity management, and also it defined critical habitat as an area with high biodiversity value. Now on the bottom of the presentation, there's 5 criteria, which is this is like definition of critical habitats as per the performance standards requirement. So if project carries out critical habitat assessment, and if the project is deemed to be impacting critical habitats, then it will need to demonstrate that impact is temporary. And if the impact to the critical habitat is shown to be the permanent, then it is considered critical. Then biodiversity offset will be required. But in Japanese law, such a requirement does not exist. So this is a kind of the gap between the EIA lender requirement and also the Japanese law requirement. Next slide, please. Okay, so from now, I will summarize key environmental social concerns on the offshore wind project in the last 2 slides. And this slide summarizes a key concern from the perspective of an EIA legal framework. So first one is the approach for the stakeholder. This is something which I already explained, but the coordination with the stakeholder is up to the developer. And the second one is this is about the scope and the coverage of an EIA study, but the social impact is normally not included. For example, like an evaluation of the social impact, like impact on the fishery, and also the mitigation approach is also up to the business. And the third one is also the scope. I explained in the beginning of the presentation, the onshore components, such as the onshore cable or substation, is normally not included in the scope of the EIA study. So EIA study for offshore wind project is normally cover the main offshore wind component and marine cable and up to the landing point. And also the fourth point is a different approach is needed for each regions. Because although EIA study for the offshore wind project is governed by the same EIA process in Japan, but potential issue is different at each region, and also the culture is different, and also the capacity and experience of local government or EIA review committee is different by the region by region. So different approach is needed for each region. And the last one, this is kind of more like a good news for the developer that initial stage of the EIA process, stage 1 or 2, may be omitted. This may be due to the implementation of the Japanese version of the centralized model, which Hasegawa-san has explained during his presentations. And Ministry of Environment announced that that they may start some more like offshore discussion about this omit of initial stage of the EIA process in the next year. So it's better to follow up the situation of this one. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide, and this slide shows the key environmental social item for the offshore wind project. The first one is a fishery. The fishery, we need engagement of fishery is a key for the success of the project. And in order to have a good communication and a good stakeholder engagement strategy is important. And having like appropriate resource, like an appropriate staff to carry out engagement with local people, including fishermen, is really key for the project. And for the EIA study, as mentioned, EIA study focus on the impact on the fish species, and it doesn't. And normally, that EIA study focus on only important species. However, there's an increased expectation from the stakeholders, including like EIA review committee, that study should cover not only designated species but also other species. So the requirement for the baseline study might be increased. And the next one is the biodiversity. For the survey method, since the survey method is not well established for offshore wind projects yet in Japan, because this is an emerging sector in Japan, so there might be a new requirement in the future compared to an ongoing project. And similar to that, development of the mitigation measure, like mitigation measure for reduce noise impact due to the piling work under the water. So for the kind of mitigation measure, there might be some more increase in expectation to implement the mitigation measure, which carry out the other projects in the other countries. And the next one is the landscape and the recreational area. This is a quite a specific issue in Japan because the proposed offshore wind project area is quite close to the coast. So the impact on the landscape and also the impact on the marine sports like surfing is quite sensitive. And there is some issue related to cultural World Heritage sites. And also, the surfing, because the local surfer just raised the concern that the important surfing point may be impacted due to the implementation of an offshore wind project. However, scientifically, I think it is not easy to show that there is no impact on the wave. Although personally, I feel that there is a really negligible impact. But having good communication, good engagement with this local community, including surfer, might be required if there's a important surfing point is located nearby the project site. And the last one is a comment from the review committee in the EIA process. Because as I explained, the capacity of EIA review committee will be different by region, and some review committee raise and more a stringent a comment, scope for the fish survey. There might be some comment that not only we need to carry out the baseline survey not only for the designated fish species, but also other normal fish species. So this is something which we need to care about for development of offshore wind project in Japan. Okay, thank you very much. This is my end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Suzuki-san. That was an in-depth, detailed analysis of the issues associated with offshore wind. A lot of them are very new. Two things which I noticed were, and I think everyone on this call is aware of them, is the issues associated with fisheries. The answers are not black and white there, but the solutions do include a lot of early stage engagement and recognition of the stakeholder issues there. The most interesting comment that I saw there from you, Suzuki-san, was the surfing comment. Important surfing points recognized by local surfers. Now, I'm sort of half humorously saying that, but I think what we can learn from that is there's probably some things that initially are overlooked in terms of stakeholders. And it might be that other customs, sporting or otherwise, do come up as well in the impact assessments that are made. I think my last comment is the biodiversity and marine mammal surveys. In terms of financing of projects, all the banks, Japanese and other banks who'll be involved in this, the ECAs, JBIC and others, very concerned and require a lot of detail regarding marine mammals and bird surveys, migratory birds. So thank you again. We've now got a couple more polling questions. We'll go to the first one. A little bit of relaxation. So what is the biggest challenge to delivery of offshore wind in Japan? Again, just one answer needed. This is obviously the technical question. The fourth question will be more on the environmental side. Okay, local technical specifications and site conditions. I saw a small sample size, but we'll take that there, local technical specifications. And I guess that's coming from international investors who are on this call. Okay, we'll go on to the environmental and social survey question. All right, I'm going to G you up and say we want a few more participants, just a couple of clicks required on this fourth question. Any three you can pick there, any three. I think a lot of people are going to pick fisheries. I don't mind giving that one away. Not everyone, maybe. Right, everyone, well, 8 out of 9 picked fishery opposition, local community, which is linked, obviously, somewhat to fishery opposition, and then a spread across the rest. Visual impact, which is also, we didn't discuss that too much, but visual impact and cultural heritage there. All right, thanks everyone for participating in the polls. We'll go on now to the Q&A. We've got 2 questions. And the first one is more, I believe, to Hasegawa-san, and it was a question raised early in the presentation. And the question is, when will the Japanese centralized model be implemented. And I presume that is the process of selection, centralized model that you referred to at the end of your presentation. Hasegawa-san, could you come on video and potentially answer that question?
Yes, I'm right. I'm very happy with this question. So this year, government has selected 3 sites for the demonstration project to achieve the Japanese centralized model. The 3 sites are one is in Hokkaido and in Yamagata Prefecture, and the last one is Iwate. So these 3 sites are selected to examine the efficiency of this model. Currently, we understand NEDO, one of the Japanese organizations, using a subsidy from NEDO, geological survey, meta-ocean survey, initial environment survey, fishing survey, and wind measurement. These surveys will be conducted by the government using a NEDO subsidy. But this is very much likely, but the government has not announced officially and clearly when they start full scale of Japanese centralized model. They just stated they will start this demonstration project, and they will decide while they are looking at the result of this NEDO demonstration project.
Okay, and that the answer is completed there? Or you'd like to add something else, Hasegawa-san?
So the actually exact answer to his question, to her question, is so it's still unclear to say when Japanese government will start centralized model. They just started only a demonstration project.
Do you want to hazard a guess? We're talking, you know, months, years, you know, is there, or it's too early to say?
Yeah, concerning this information announced by the government, it's quite difficult to say when exactly.
Okay. Anyway, so you have to monitor offshore wind webinars in the future to find out as decisions are made. The second question we have is to Suzuki-san, and it's hopefully a little more simple, which is how long typically does the biodiversity study, biodiversity survey and fishery impact evaluation take in Japan, typically?
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. In the EIA, you know, there's like an EIA guideline for each sector, which include, you know, which include a wind project. And EIA guideline for the wind project stipulates the standard method for the baseline. And according to the guideline, normally it required 1 year for the biodiversity. So that is something which is described in EIA ordinance. But for the fishery impact evaluation, again, this is not like legal required, and there's no. This is quite a new topic for the offshore wind project. So this is something which is kind of confirmed to the discussion in the council. But some people say that the 3 years is a kind of the standard for the duration for fishery impact assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. That's the end of our questions raised by our attendees. I have one more question for you, Yohei. And the question is, where are the best surfing locations in Japan? Sorry, we're coming to the end of the webinar, so
I know. Yeah, there's a
little more
various,
humor.
really good surfing point, including the Miyazaki,
okay.
south of Japan, Chiba, and
South
also,
of-
Tohoku area. Also, there's some really good surfing points.
Okay.
And I have to say that the surfing is one of the kind of the really important sports for the local people. So it is really important to respect the surfing sport too at a certain level.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering that question, and it's significant, obviously. I think we're coming to the end now. We've made good timing. We've got just over 10 minutes to go in our scheduled time, but we've answered all the questions. And one thing that we like our clients and attendees at these webinars to remember about us is that we always either finish on time or early, so people will be able to get a little bit more of their lives back and catch up on some other things. So just my final comments are, thank you very much for attending, everyone who attended. Thank you to our speakers, Hasegawa-san and Suzuki-san. My last comment would be, obviously everyone on this call, and the vote confirmed that, was that they see most time and investment and opportunities in Japan out of the 4 different jurisdictions that we're discussing on our webinars. And just my comment is, obviously a foreigner, though I did work for one of the Japanese trading houses for a number of years in their IPP department. And what I can say is that there's a lot of analysis and a lot of research and a lot of engagement, and decision making took longer than some people from other cultures expected. But however, once decisions are made, they're always the right. The decisions are justifiable, and the Japanese will stick to them. So if regulations come in, they're not going to change. If projects are announced to be developed, then changes are going to be minimal. That's probably the thing I took out of my time working in the Japanese power sector and for Japanese companies offshore. Anyone got a comment to make, or a last question? We'll keep live for about 30 seconds, and then if there's nothing, everybody can drop off whenever they like to. And again, thanks everyone for joining, and I hope you enjoy if you are attending the China and Taiwan webinars that we're having next week. Thanks everyone.